my god. It looked a lot more, I promise. So, well, I usually have a book at my toilet. It's called the Book of Poetry. Don't touch me. I don't know where the book went, but this will be added to it. To be as big as you. Get you. Inside. Fuck trying.
to chew her out. I know what happens between you and her isn't my business. I just felt like it was wrong of her, and I thought she'd eventually see why she was wrong. I get she was upset about seeing you smoking, but to me it wasn't justified because everything else you guys do together is fine. But that's gonna make her freak out. update you when I find her. Okay. Oh. Fuck. Oh no. Oh, fuck. Come on. Fuck, Glenn. Fuck, douchebag. Hi. What's the matter, baby?
What I'm concerned, on the other hand, is that there are certain evident expanded definitions or increased involvement of criminal law, especially when it comes to sexuality. I'm becoming a little bit concerned. I mean, to be what might going to be the result for that?
A case being looked at Canada's highest court could have implications on the definitions of assault and consent. At the centre, a 2017 sexual encounter between a BC man and a woman. She said she consented to sex but asked him to wear a condom, and he didn't. Kate Feeney is with West Coast Leaf, one of the interveners in this case.
There's a tension between the case law on condom removal, stealthing, and condom sabotage, and the case law on HIV non-disclosure. West Coast Leaf is really concerned about the inclusion of HIV non-disclosure in sexual assault law, and we'd like to see it be removed from sexual assault law in order to reduce the overcriminalization of people living with HIV, including women living with HIV.
Aaron Purdy and Evan Machette Wong are both with the Health Initiative for Men. They agree there could be problems down the line for the gay queer community, with condom use often tied to HIV disclosure. With medications that make HIV nearly intransmissible, advocates say this could lead to more stigma.
With the paradigm of HIV, which has been criminalized for many, many years, we have seen firsthand the impacts of what happens when we criminalize a virus, which is not the same as criminalizing a behavior, but we understand that there are some interesting implications to that criminalization if that were to occur.
With medical advancements, law and policy also have to follow suit in it. We can't reliably use laws and policies that were written before certain medical advancements, especially in the case of HIV. And a lot of this is not only determined by lawmakers and policymakers, but also by judges in the courts who decide on cases.
That's why both Machette Wong and Purdy say sexual health education and consent education must be top priority.
I think the biggest component is really trying to secure enthusiastic consent. So as opposed to no means no, it really should be an enthusiastic yes means yes. It's less ambiguous, it's more direct, and it can prevent a whole lot of complications.
Trauma, complications, pregnancies, unwanted STIs.
For now, the justices at Canada's highest court have taken the info from the hearing under advisement. In Vancouver, Ria Renouf, City News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our show. We are happy that you can join us. I'm Melissa Bridgen. We've got a great show for you today, starting with one of the first women in Canada to be labeled a dangerous offender. She has a fascinating story, one that may eventually be turned into a movie. It's a tale of an abusive, oppressive system and one woman's perseverance to fight her way to freedom. Renee Akobe was set to join us today, but she fell ill. I'll tell you about her story, though, and one of the warrior women fighting for her and others, Senator Kim Pate. She will be here joining us, along with she's been a long time, warrior fighting for justice for Indigenous people who've been brutalized by the corrections system, which of course only exists if they can keep our people incarcerated. We're also going to get into the Pope's visit and the delegation that is heading to the Vatican to meet him. What's the point of this all? Should he even set foot on Canadian soil? Should survivors or Indigenous leaders be going to the Vatican? You all have lots to say on our social media, so we're going to get into some of that. Also on the show, the province of Manitoba officially ended birth alerts, which flag, of course, a pregnant woman's medical file so that the hospital will notify child welfare officials when she's having her baby, and this oftentimes leads to immediate apprehension of that newborn. Well, we don't believe for a second that these have actually ended. It's more likely they've been rebranded. But we do know that drastically fewer babies are being taken from their mothers now than they were a few years ago. We're going to talk to the Mothering Project. That's an organization here in Winnipeg that's helped more than 200 women keep their babies, and why this program should be copied and expanded elsewhere in the province, maybe even elsewhere in Canada, for those of you watching elsewhere who might want to see it taken and just done the same way where you live. Lastly, we talked to Denny, doctor who is leading the charge for other doctors to prescribe nature as a treatment for an assortment of health issues. Of course, this is a call-in show. You can call us toll-free, 1-877-647-2786. Well, Renee Akobe was 21 when she started a jail sentence on assault and drug offenses and breaching numerous court-imposed conditions. It should have been a 3-year term, but she was held as a dangerous offender because of a number of incidents that happened while she was incarcerated. Hostage takings, attacks on staff, uttering threats. Corrections Canada had said that she was one of the most dangerous prisoners in Canada. Well, she learned to use violence in the system that held her and was kept there for exactly that reason. Psych reports have since been thrown out, saying that they're designed for white men, not to be used on white women. An independent therapist unchecked all of these boxes that Corrections Canada was using to keep her jailed. She was recently granted full parole, and she's now living a normal life in Vancouver. But it wasn't an easy battle to get out from under a system that's designed to keep Indigenous women like her under its boot. But like I said, she fell ill today, so she can't join us. But Senator Kim Pate, who's one of the people who helped her fight her way to freedom, she joins us now. Joining me now is Senator Kim Pate, a longtime advocate, warrior for Indigenous people being incarcerated in Canada. So, Senator Pate, thanks for joining us. I have to ask, how did Renee's case land on your radar?
Well, I first met Renee when she first came into the system. We have daughters very close in age, and in fact, our children were in the child care center together at the Healing Lodge back more than 2 decades ago. So I've known Renee since she came into the system as a very young woman.
You've seen how that system operates, particularly for Indigenous people. It seems like it's meant to get you in and keep you in. Is that accurate?
Well, particularly for Indigenous women, in my experience, I was shocked when I first started working with women about 30 years ago, after working with young people and men, to see just how disproportionately women, particularly racialized women, are considered as dangerous or violent for things that, as the Court of Appeal in Lisa Neve's case, another Indigenous woman said, for things they say, not what they do. And so, yes, there are things that Renee and other people have done that have caused them to be, further criminalized in the system. But we would never see a man labeled a dangerous offender for the sorts of things that we see women labeled, whether it's Lisa Neve, who was the first Indigenous woman to be labeled a dangerous offender, or Renee, or other women who have come before the system. We also know that disproportionately Indigenous men get labeled as dangerous offenders for behavior that we wouldn't see non-Indigenous men get labeled. And so it underscores the discriminatory nature of the risk assessment tools, as you and many others have really appropriately exposed, but which the government has yet to actually meaningfully address.
Well, in this case with Renee, she had been mislabeled an assortment of times. Later, one of the advocates that helped her get out on parole, a therapist had gone through kind of a checklist of things saying, like, this was done wrong, this was done wrong, this was done wrong. Was it just an isolated incident that had happened with Renee, or do you think this is happening over and over? Do we know? Do we know that it's happening?
We know it's happening over and over again. The challenge is getting it exposed publicly because, like so many women, and Indigenous women in particular, often internalize the labels that are put on them. They're told that they are dangerous. They're told that they are violent. I can't tell you how many women I have met over the years, and now we're talking about 42 to 40%, 44% of the women in federal custody are Indigenous, disproportionately characterized as higher security, disproportionately less likely to have access to programs and services, and disproportionately less likely to get access back to the community. That is a travesty. And when we know that the majority of those women are mothers, we know that it actually subjugates generations to come in the way that we already are, or I guess many of us have known, but some in Canada are just starting to wake up to the impact, the intergenerational impact of residential schools, of forced state removal of children, sometimes often referred to as the 60s scoop, to, incredible child welfare involvement. And not surprising, the same province, Saskatchewan and Manitoba, actually lead the way in the incarceration of Indigenous people. 98% of the girls in custody under the age of 18 are Indigenous. So we have a massive overrepresentation, and really it amounts to a discriminatory way of looking at the lives and the attempts to survive poverty, racism, past trauma that is disproportionately experienced by Indigenous women, in my experience.
Well, and do you think that now we're at a time, because of the residential schools being kind of at the forefront of the minds of most Canadians now, that this is the time for them to get the message that these problems are created by these systems. It's the residential school system. It's the child welfare system. All of these are pipelines into the prison system, and the prison system creates its own problems once they get in there. I mean, a lot of these women, when they're relatively minor things, and what happens when they're locked up is it escalates. Do you think now is the time that people are going to start figuring this out, on one hand, and for two, I was kind of surprised that people weren't paying closer attention to it before, because it's very expensive to keep people in jail, right? You would think that the average taxpayer would be like, well, why? I don't like warehousing these people at this astronomical cost. What can we do to, keep them out of jail, or to lower the recidivism rate, or whatever? You'd think that there would be conversations with a whole bunch of different ways, that we wouldn't be just locking people up for hundreds of years and throwing out the key. I don't know. I guess there was a question in there of all. I guess the question is, like, are we at a time now where we're going to start having more of these conversations and seeing this for what it is?
I certainly hope so. I mean, it is not lost on many people that when Nelson Mandela became president of South Africa, one of the first things he did was free all of the women in prison who had children under the age of 12, because he recognized that many of them were there because they were trying to negotiate poverty, protect their children. If we look at Renee, if we look at others, I mean, the parliamentary budget officer in 2010 included a costing of what corrections was doing with Renee in particular, and talked about the fact that they could put her through Harvard as an international student, and she could then be contributing in all kinds of ways to the community, to her family, and to the community at large, for the costs up until then that they were spending on incarcerating her. We know that, in fact, if we invest in, and Renee, like so many others, started her time, she was doing a less than 3-year sentence. She was implicated with other people, not to diminish people's responsibility, but many times women are acting in concert, often with their partners, their boyfriend, or somebody else in their family. Sometimes they're taking responsibility for other people's actions, because the perception, wrong as it is that women will get off more lightly. In fact, the opposite is true. Women tend to be classified as higher security. If they're 90% of the children of women who end up in custody end up in the care of the state, versus about 10% of the children of men who end up in custody, because there's usually someone left behind looking after those children in the cases of men. That doesn't mean we don't need change across the board, but if we focus on what happens in particular for Indigenous women, we see the intersections of the worst of racism, of sexism, and of the intergenerational impact of systemic inequality. And so if we invested in their supports to keep people in the community through housing, through things like a guaranteed livable income, through things like support systems, we would actually see far fewer women in custody. We would see lower rates of victimization, lower rates of incarceration, and better overall well-being for everyone. Now, how could we not want that? And it is well past time that we invest in people in community, not in prisons.
Well, thank God we have you in the Senate who is keeping this issue at the forefront, pushing for this, and we'll keep pushing for it too. Here, we love the people who are warriors for a cause like this, and that we are maybe at a point in time where we're going to see that there's value in that. So we will just keep covering it.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all of your incredible work.
But coming up, the Pope might be heading to Canada to discuss his church's role in Canada's residential school history. Ottawa was abuzz last week with news of a proposed visit by Pope Francis. The Catholic Bishops of Canada says that the Pope has accepted an invitation to come here. But you, our audience, you've got a lot to say about that. We're going to get into that when we come back. Jesse Andrushko will tell you all about it.
Join our conversation now. Call in toll free at 1-877-647-2786. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page. Follow or tweet us at APTN In Focus, and send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
Welcome back. Before we get to your comments about the Pope's planned visit to Canada, we want to go to a caller to talk about our last guest and the issue that we were talking about with Senator Kim Pate, that being the over-incarceration of Indigenous people in Canada's prisons. Kate, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm quite impressed, actually.
Oh, with what?
With the topic of today and Kim Pate's perspective.
She's a great lady, hey?
She really is. She's a good person, and my understanding, I'm here since 1968, and I'm originally South African.
Okay, well, welcome.
Thank you. And I was from the very beginning, given the fact that some of the system from Canada was taken and imposed in South Africa.
Right, there's a lot of similarities.
Reservations.
Mm-hmm.
So the similarity I knew of almost from the very beginning that I got here, and I'm a retired school teacher, and I always felt that I would like to do something to help with a system that is very similar and reminiscent of South Africa.
Yeah, well, we're just thankful that you tuned in here. That's a start. Even just getting educated about some of the same things that go on here that you would have known from coming from South Africa. Well, thank you for calling in. We're going to move on now to the Pope is planning to visit Canada, bringing a wide range of reactions from people across the country. APTN's Leanne Sanders is in Vancouver with some of that.
Residential school survivor Charlie Morrison spent 30 years on these streets, and today he's at the corner of Main and Hastings to place a teddy bear on an ever-growing memorial for the children who never came home from residential school.
I'd like to say I'm just toy to the kids who are missing. I'm so emotional right now to say anything but thank you very much.
Morrison, who is from Kitimat, BC, was taken to the Port Alberni Residential School, along with all 7 of his siblings. He escaped after 1 year, but was forever scarred by the experience.
And I never did once deal with my residential school stuff. I didn't think it bothered me until my grandkids started talking about it.
He said there should also be a criminal investigation into what happened to the children in those schools, especially given the high numbers.
Even for one person, it should be investigated. If it was the other people, they'd investigate right now. There's just so many people that are missing, and they're gone for so long. I don't know how to cover it up so long. I think they should.
And across the city, at the Vancouver Art Gallery, a large memorial has been set up. Angela White is the head of the Indian Residential School Survivors Society. She says news of the papal visit has created high hopes and some doubt.
In some sense, it is really about, people are really glad that he's making the effort and it's a first step. And on the other side of it, it's really clear that they're saying, don't waste your time unless you're coming with actionable items and not just empty promises.
She says the discovery of the 215 children in Kamloops has re-traumatized survivors and their families.
And if he's not going to apologize, I think we honestly need to prepare not just the leadership, but the survivors for what is coming, because the last thing we want is for them to be further isolated and disregarded in the lack of apology.
And how does Charlie Morrison feel about the Pope's visit to Canada?
The family from the missing people, they need some kind of closure or apology from somebody. They're going to get an apology, but they've waited this long. They've waited this long already, and I think it will help with their healing too for some people.
The memorial here has been growing since the 215 children were found. Since the Pope has announced a planned visit to Canada, many survivors we spoke to are hopeful that this will be the start of real healing and reconciliation in Canada. Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Thank you, Leanne. Just for you at home watching, Leanne is our new correspondent for the Saskatchewan, province of Saskatchewan. She was in Vancouver covering that, but you'll still be seeing lots more of her on APTN National News covering Saskatchewan. Well, we wanted to know how you feel about Pope's plan to visit to Canada. You flooded our social media editor, Jesse Andrushko, with your comments. Jesse?
Thanks, Melissa. We had hundreds of comments coming in. We asked our followers whether they think the Pope's visit will help residential school survivors heal, and also what they think he should do while in Canada. Let's take a look. On Facebook, Clara said she doesn't want to hear what the Pope has to say. No amount of apology from him or Trudeau will erase all the pain that the residential schools, Indian agents, and RCMP did to families, threatening to jail our parents and grandparents. Earl said, if this guy funds the investigation and convicts the guilty responsible for the disgusting acts of the government and the religious priests and nuns, it's the only way, justice. April commented, Surrey doesn't hold any one of these institutions accountable for their actions against Indigenous people, for murder, rape, torture, and experiments on 7,000 plus babies, children, and young teenagers. Ace said, release all the documents of priests and nuns that are still alive and buried children to be prosecuted. That's a start. Alan pointed out that we shouldn't overlook the role of the role that politicians and senior bureaucrats played in enabling abuse. He says they failed in their roles, they should pay. And as many of these people are dead, take it from their estates and families. Families of the abuse suffer, so why should the families of abusers be exempt? From Kevin, what everyone is missing is that you should never have to be asked or coerced to make an apology if you are truly sorry for your organization's actions. Sophia said that the Pope needs to go back to Europe along with the others who perpetrated heinous crimes. This is Indigenous lands and we had no say whether he comes or not. It's a slap in the face to our sovereign nations. You cannot expect us to forgive the Church for murder. Kirk said, why does our elected Native leaders want the Pope to apologize? Just for recognition of their political prowess. If the Pope wanted to be here, he would have done it already. The Pope's apology won't heal anyone's hurting except these elected Native leaders of ours who like the spotlight. From Nancy, I think that yes, an apology from the Catholic Church is warranted. However, the Catholic Church should pay for all that goes with bringing the children to their proper resting places, and retribution should be paid to each and every family touched by this horrific part of Catholic history in Canada. Amber said, exact opposite of what residential survivors want and need. Bringing a Pope in to heal them from what the exact people did to them. What is wrong with y'all? This is going to set them off and sure does not heal them. Ingrid commented, nothing will help. The abuse, suffering, and loss isn't going away with an empty apology. Being in the public eye is them basically putting on a show. Lastly, Lainey pointed out that the comments speak for themselves. She said no one wants a visit from him. This will add to the trauma, nothing healing about it. Very interesting comments. Thank you everyone that shared their thoughts. Back to you, Melissa.
Thanks for that, Jesse. So we have on the line Chickadee. You say the Pope is not welcome here because how do you say sorry when your church has taken our baby ancestors' lives? Chickadee, you don't want him here at all.
Not at all. I don't believe that he has any kind of right to come here and make an apology when there's no retribution, there's no accountability. You know, that he had a chance to come. The Pope before had a chance to come and apologize to the survivors, and he never did.
Yeah.
And that church never did.
You think that it's just there's pressure from Catholics now, just kind of wanting something from their church because of the confirmation of the dead babies in on the grounds of their residential schools?
Yes, and there's going to be more findings of our baby ancestors. Yeah. And, you know, every day is a reminder, and it's pain, and it's a national grief that we as Indigenous people are feeling every day. We don't know what's going to come next. And why would he come here when he represents, an entity that has done irreversible harm and has taken the lives of many people. Not only lives where they've been murdered, but lives where they've been, they're living on the street. There's family structures that have been harmed.
Absolutely.
So you represent an entity that's evil. That's what I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Chickadee. Russ, we have Russ on the phone. What do you think about the Pope's planned visit here, or else the Indigenous leaders who want to go to the Vatican and meet him there?
Well, Melissa, I grew up in Welland, Ontario. I'm just a white guy, and I know 30 people that killed themselves. And honestly, the people like the Catholic bishops that took advantage of vulnerable people, they'll take advantage of any vulnerable people. But if they can manage to put them in a cage like they did with the residential schools, then they got free reign. However, this Pope Francis, I'll let you know now, I'm not a Catholic. I basically believe in Mother Nature. So if this Pope wants to come and apologize, bring him in for a slice of pizza and a beer and see what he's got to say. Because quite simply, I think this Pope would literally throw every diddling priest in a dungeon if he could. So the punishment can never be enough. Retaliation, forgiveness, it's never enough. And survivor guilt, hell yeah. Because I know so many people dead. And well, it's everybody from a Catholic priest to Alberta Safety Elephant Cop. Boy Scouts, the Scoutmasters, they will all take advantage of the vulnerable.
Yeah.
So if the Pope wants to come, welcome him with open arms and ask him which church to rip down and auction off.
Thank you, Russ, for your comments. Thanks. John McDonald, you've said you have zero interest in an apology from the church. You want none of their money. How come?
Well, it's not like I'm on the guest list anyways. And of course, my opinions are mine alone. I spent my first 9 years basically in a residential school. I attended during that time a Catholic elementary school. So I've had enough Catholicism and words from the Catholic Church to do me a lifetime. And for me personally, the empty promises of a sanctimonious, quasi-political religious leader, they're not going to change what happened to me. His words aren't going to take back the humiliation I felt when I was told my language was gibberish and I was punished for speaking it. It's not going to take back the humiliation I felt when the teachers in said Catholic elementary school on a dry day would say, well, why don't you just do a rain dance? Oh my God. It's not, I'm done with empty promises. I'm done with words. And money is not going to fix that. Yeah. Money is not going to fix the fact that we have severe broken cycles. The fact that across northern Saskatchewan, we have Indigenous communities who are so far removed from Indigenous cultural practices and spirituality that are so tied to both the Catholic and the Anglican Church that any Indigenous culture is often seen, and these are direct quotes from my time visiting in some of these communities, as barbarism, being seen as unholy blasphemy, and having myself been told when I've taken an eagle feather and a drum into northern communities, put that away, we don't do that here.
Yeah, we do see that.
And we've had so many empty promises.
It's just not worth it for him to come here and give another one. Well, John, thank you. We appreciate you and you're weighing in on that too. I think there's a pretty overwhelming sense that people aren't interested in this visit.
There are some, I'm not going to, like I said, I don't speak for all residential schools.
No, we did hear some say that they want the apology for sure, but I think
there are some that will get healing from it.
Yeah.
And I hope they, in their journey, that this doesn't open more wounds, and if it does, that they have enough medicine around them and community around them to heal.
I appreciate that. Thanks, John.
Take care, my friend.
Take care. So we're moving on now. We've got to go on to, so birth alerts. Most of the provinces in this country have ended birth alerts officially. They put out the announcements. They've had the press conference. It was one of the calls for justice in the National Inquiry into Missing Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report that flagging a pregnant woman as being high risk and then having child welfare workers come into the hospital, take her newborn baby, it's one of the most violent acts that a state can inflict on a woman. In Manitoba alone, a newborn a day was being taken every year for decades. Well, the trauma imposed is like what was done in residential schools and often leaves those mothers at high risk to go missing or be found murdered as they spiral in the wake of a loss like that. And there's no recourse for them to ever get their babies back again in most cases. So lots of these kids are raised in foster homes. So again, separating families. These birth alerts have gone on for decades. Now a class action lawsuit has been filed with BC Supreme Court. It's seeking justice for those who have been victimized by these birth alerts. Here's Dennis Ward with Lisa Lombard, who's one of the lawyers behind that class action.
Ms. Lombard, thanks so much for being with us. For those who don't know, can you just give us a brief on, what birth alerts are and how they work in Canada?
Sure. So birth alerts are practiced that are usually engaged by child and family services agencies. They are issued on the file of a pregnant woman. And that information is then somehow disclosed to a hospital who then alerts authorities when a child is born, or perhaps not. But the birth alert remains on the file. That information is shared, and often or sometimes the child is apprehended in a hospital. So that is essentially the context underpinning the birth alert practice.
Now, a number of provinces over the last year or two have announced that they're stopping these alerts. Why is a class action still necessary at this point?
Well, first, as we know, sometimes practices cease formally occurring. It doesn't mean that they actually cease occurring. And so we do think that this practice still carries on. But most importantly, there are many women and children and families who have been terribly impacted by this practice, who have experienced tremendous trauma as a result of it. And they have their right to their day in court and to justice.
In Manitoba, it used to be pretty common that there was a child apprehended like every single day of the year, or more than 365 a year. How widespread is this practice, and is the class action going to be national in scope?
Indeed, it is national. There's a consortium working on it with very competent lawyers in class actions and constitutional rights and Indigenous rights from across the country. They're from British Columbia through Saskatchewan and Manitoba, formally working on those particular provinces, as well as Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes, and so it is national in scope.
And so how can women and families come forward to join the class action?
Well, there is some information available, and that has been circulated by way of a press release, and depending on where they are situated, where they are located, and where this may have happened. If they are located in British Columbia, they will want to get in touch with the Camp Fiorante Matthews Woman. If they are in Alberta as well, that's who they'll want to contact. If they are in Manitoba or Saskatchewan, they'll want to get in touch with us. That's Agnes or Lombard. If they're in Ontario, with Odell Phillips. In Quebec, Melo Lapointe. And if they are in the Maritimes, the Verclaw Group.
Well, Ms. Lombard, we'll have to leave it there, but appreciate you taking some time for us here today.
Thank you for having me.
So in Manitoba, when the province announced it was going to end the controversial practice of birth alerts a couple of years ago, they simultaneously said that more resources would be given to organizations to help pregnant women with the supports that they need to keep their babies. It sounds suspicious. I was suspicious when I heard it. But we've been waiting patiently to see if this is actually working. Well, Elaine Morris is the director of the Mothering Project based here in Winnipeg that was tapped to help keep newborns out of the system and at home with their moms and other family members. So we're checking in with her today. Elaine, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So, I don't think anybody really believes that all birth alerts have ended in Manitoba. Lots of suspicion that they've been kind of rebranded maybe. But we do know that there certainly has been a drastic reduction in the number of babies that are taken from the hospital, from their mothers. As we said, typically one a day here in Manitoba. The government shifted to supporting at-risk moms. That's where the Mothering Project comes in through Mount Royal Clinic. So why don't you tell our national audience here how it works?
Well, so the Mothering Project has been here at Mount Carmel Clinic since 2009. We started the Mothering Project to really get out there and work with our community based on what they've identified as their needs. So a lot of women in community said, hey, we need somewhere to be where we can be pregnant or parenting and identify that we're chaotically substance using and we need help, because there's a lot of judgment and stigma that, wraps around what that looks like for women. And so we've been doing that since about 2019, and we did get additional funding with the work that we're doing that is, trauma-informed, harm reduction centered from a kindness perspective, to start doing the work of that preventative method in terms of keeping folks with their babies at birth. So we can see babies going home from the hospital as an additional point of contact for the outreach team that we have now.
And this is voluntary, right? So women who have been identified by, who I guess we can say flagged, like they used to get flagged with a birth alert, they're flagged now with maybe the Mothering Project can come in and help them. What do they need in terms of supports? Do they need housing? Do they need parenting classes? Do they need help with addictions? Do they need, and that's, so then they're asked, is this something that's of interest to you? Do you want help? And it's on, the onus is on the mother to say she does. Is that correct? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Our entire program, right from the beginning of time, has always been voluntary. We're not a program that any system can come and say, we expect a mother to be able to do this program. It all needs to be voluntary. So for us, it is nothing about you without you, and it's all about what the woman's goal is for success. Everybody's model of goals and success for themselves all looks differently. Everybody comes from a different space. Everybody has their own life.
People from the average salary cannot afford an apartment for a family here in Montreal. It's too expensive.
Social and affordable housing has been a major ballot box issue throughout Montreal's municipal election campaign. The city's community activists and residents say no matter who comes into power November 7th, they want to see the promises turn into concrete change.
We are hoping for more measures to end evictions, for more rent control, and the implementation of a lease registry.
A 2021 Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation report found average rent in Montreal shot up by 4.2% last year, the biggest increase since 2003. Amy Darwish, community group coordinator, says Montreal is at a crossroads and the next mayor has to ask themselves tough questions.
Do we want Montreal to remain a city that's affordable to immigrants, to families, to precarious workers, to people living on social assistance, or do we simply want it to be a playground for developers and for the rich?
I moved here from Vancouver about 10 years ago or so, and so it was a big change then to go from that price and down to where Montreal was.
was then. But now Montreal seems to be catching up quite a bit. Like I feel like I'm back in that same boat. Like if I want to move, I'm looking at paying twice what I'm paying now. 5 years ago, paying $7.50 for a 3.5, and now you have to go pay $15.50 for a 3.5. Just a little bit nicer, but it's a little bit out of control.
The Park Extension Action Group unveiled interactive maps on Wednesday that highlight the distribution and evolution of evictions in the borough since 2017, based on data they collected as the Tenants' Rights Group Association for the area. Darwish and her colleagues working on keeping neighborhoods affordable.
There's real action that needs to be taken in order for people to be able to remain in the neighborhoods that they love and they call home.
Incumbent Mayor Valérie Plante and Projet Montréal have committed to building 60,000 affordable housing units over 10 years. The party also says it would implement an owner certificate for buildings of 8 or more units to keep track of renovations and more. Ensemble Montréal would create a rent registry and increase the number of inspectors. Party leader Denis Coderre also promised to build 50,000 new housing units in his first mandate if elected. Mouvement Montréal's Balarama Holness would make all new residential developments with 8 or more units contain 30% social housing and 30% affordable housing and create a register to serve as a rent control system.
Most of the promises are more aimed towards affordable housing, which is calculated as a percentage of the market rate, which in a context of real estate speculation like we're seeing, actually ends up not being affordable for the overwhelming majority of low-income tenants who are struggling to find a decent place to live.
The amount people are getting paid and the amount they need to pay have to align in a way that makes it affordable to live in the place where you work.
In Montreal, Alicia Rubertucci, City News.
It's obviously been a tall task for cities and local health organizations to be able to roll things out for first and second doses. Now the task at hand is to try and get third doses to those in need and convince people to do so.
There are many more options available for people to get their third dose than were available when people first started getting vaccinated.
65,000 people in Toronto will be eligible for a third dose as of Monday, based on expanded eligibility announced by the province. As a result, 5 city-run immunization clinics are returning to a booked appointment-based system, with 40,000 spots available over the next 2 weeks.
I encourage you to book an appointment when you are eligible at a location that is most convenient for you.
Communities like Regent Park have local health organizations continuing to run immunization clinics in the neighborhood, something they vowed to try and continue for those in need of third shots and children when approved.
We'll look at making that available in the best way possible for community members. So that could look like expanding the hours of our clinic potentially, looking at setting up pop-ups if needed.
Education continues to be key though. Some maybe become more hesitant. Convincing those to get more doses or shots for their kids is something Toronto Public Health has already vowed to do through town halls and webinars.
I think it's something very clear because as long as it is helping people to save their lives, it's not about arguing, it's about knowing that how are we saving our lives. If the government sees that's going to help the people, let them go and do it.
There's definite evidence of for people who are immunocompromised and those are the people the third dose can be very helpful. It can help with their immune system. So I think for those people, definitely they should get it.
More than 84% of people in Toronto have had 2 COVID shots as of now, something Mayor John Tory believes will have an impact on what's to come.
I think a lot of people who've had vaccinations over time of different kinds are quite used to the concept of a booster shot. They know that with regard to other kinds of injections they have on a routine basis. And I think what we're more likely to get, and this is where Dr. Davila is right, we're going to have the information available, is questions that relate to, as it has been the case before, what if I had one of these and one of those, and when did I have my last one, and how do I tell, and the kinds of questions that are very basic, not on the principle of whether you should get a booster shot.
This is a healthcare intervention. I think it's important that people feel that it's okay. It's more than okay. It's actually quite reasonable to raise questions and to actually engage in conversation around your unique circumstances and what your concerns are.
Now, Dr. Davila is also encouraging people to get their flu shots right now as well, saying those city-run clinics that will be opening to people who want those third dose COVID shots, they can get them both at the same time.
As he showed up for his shift today in the ER, nurse Nathan Friedland was frustrated.
We're supposed to promote vaccination. We're supposed to promote the safety of our patients. And healthcare workers who are not vaccinated at this point in time are not doing that.
The Quebec government is backing down on mandatory vaccinations for healthcare workers, opting instead for mandatory testing 3 times a week.
This is not negotiable, and we will be uncompromising for those who do not want to be tested. It will be suspended without pay.
97% of the province's healthcare workers have had at least one shot, but Quebec's health minister says the system just can't afford to lose those thousands of workers who haven't.
I think it was the only decision that was possible.
With the system already short-staffed, one healthcare workers union says suspending unvaccinated staff in some areas would have caused major disruptions.
I think that basically they came to the conclusion that to apply it could cause more damage than not to apply it.
Ontario made a similar calculation after seeing what other provinces were facing. It won't proceed with the vaccine mandate either.
The concern that we had that we would lose some of our precious health human resources compared to a relatively small number of outbreaks.
The BC government is standing firm. More than 3,000 workers there are on unpaid leave, and some surgeries have been postponed. But in Quebec, intensive care specialist Dr. Joseph Dahine says the healthcare network is used to making adjustments, and plans were in place to reorganize.
At the end of all that effort, the government has had to just give up on that target. Is this heartening, to be quite frank?
Some healthcare workers are challenging the mandate in court. Their lawyer says she's pleased with this change.
It's a very big deal because they were actually facing a very difficult choice to make.
So, Allison, if current Quebec healthcare workers who are unvaccinated can keep their jobs, what happens to new hires?
Well, any new healthcare workers hired will have to be vaccinated. And one union says that it will also try to convince those unvaccinated workers to get their shots, even though it's no longer required for them to be able to keep working. Quebec Premier François Legault says it's hard for him to understand why someone in healthcare wouldn't want to get vaccinated, but he said the government is making a responsible decision because they need those workers.
All right, Allison Northcott in Montreal, thank you.
India's indigenous COVID-19 vaccine, Covaxin, has been approved by the World Health Organization for emergency use. This means that Covaxin now joins the 7 vaccines approved by the World Health Organization. This means that the current list approved by the United Nations Health Body now includes Covaxin, along with Moderna, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Covishield, Johnson & Johnson, Sinopharm, and Sinovac. The WHO has said that the Covaxin vaccine meets its standards for protection against COVID-19. It also added that the benefits of the jab far outweigh the risks. The vaccine was also reviewed by WHO's Strategic Advisory Group of Experts on Immunization. It has recommended the use of this vaccine in 2 doses with a dose interval of 4 weeks in all age groups of 18 years and above. But the UN Health Body said that the available data on vaccination of pregnant women with Covaxin is insufficient to assess the vaccine safety or efficacy in pregnancy. Studies in pregnant women are planned, including a pregnancy sub-study and a pregnancy registry. Earlier, the World Health Organization was in the process of evaluating Covaxin's clinical trial data for emergency use listing. The WHO had asked biotech for more data on Covaxin. India had also raised the issue of Covaxin approval at the G20 summit. Bharat Biotech has said that the emergency use of Covaxin will expedite global access and availability of the vaccine worldwide. WHO's emergency use listing for Covaxin facilitates countries now to expedite their regulatory approval processes. It also allows procurement by UNICEF and the Gavi COVAX facility for distribution to countries in need. Covaxin has demonstrated 77.8% effectiveness against symptomatic COVID-19 and 65.2% protection against the Delta variant of COVID-19. India has administered more than 121 million doses of Covaxin. This means that over 59 million people in India have received the shot. Countries that have approved Covaxin include Australia, Mauritius, Oman, the Philippines, Nepal, Mexico, Iran, Sri Lanka, Greece, Estonia, and Zimbabwe. Let's go straight across now to our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sipal, for more on that. Siddhant, long-anticipated announcement finally being made by the World Health Organization. Take us through what this means for those who have taken the shot.
Well, it's a big Diwali gift from the World Health Organization, but when it comes to what impacts the entire development happens is the fact that it helps in the ease of movement of many Indians who have been vaccinated by Covaxin, because now it is an approval which is a global approval, and it also expedites the regulatory approval by various countries who are planning to import Covaxin as well. We know already India has sent Covaxin to countries like Iran. So many Iranians also get the benefit along with other countries. It especially impacts and is a positive news for many students, Indian students who have been studying in universities across the world, from Europe to United States, because they were not able to travel because they were vaccinated by Covaxin, and in some of the cases they even got another vaccine, which of course is dangerous because Covaxin was not given approval by the World Health Organization. Of course, it took a lot of time. It has been considerable time as compared to other vaccines that have been given approval by the World Health Organization. But World Health Organization says that it was looking into data, and the technical group is the top body that needs to give approval before they can go ahead. Of course, this is the Indian vaccine. Covaxin is the second India-made vaccine to be given approval, but the first Indian COVID vaccine to be given approval. There are many Indians who have been vaccinated, and by and large, it's a happy news for them.
Indeed, and we are leaving it there for the moment. Siddhant, thanks very much for those updates. Also with us on the broadcast is India's former permanent representative to the United Nations, Dilip Sinha. Thanks very much for speaking with us. What do you make of the delay and the questions that have been raised all along regarding the WHO approval? Your initial reaction also to this announcement, which comes after the Prime Minister of India had raised the issue of WHO's approval for Covaxin at the G20 summit with the WHO chief.
Well, the entire handling of the COVID pandemic, although it was an unprecedented emergency, has not covered the WHO in glory. This vaccine recognition was long overdue. There were some issues regarding procedural matters that have been raised. But the very fact that the G20 summit and its declaration had to say that there is need to strengthen WHO's ability regarding the approval of vaccines and to optimize its procedures shows that there are questions procedure that's been followed by the WHO. In certain cases, for example, the case of the Chinese vaccine Sinopharm, although the approval was given very early, there were questions raised later in several countries regarding the safety and the efficacy of the vaccine. So the fact that this vaccine approval has come through is a big relief for the company as well as for the millions of Indians who have taken this vaccine and they travel abroad. And it also eases the vaccine availability, which is extremely important in the world today, because there is a tremendous dearth of vaccines. And India, with its ability to provide these vaccines to the, especially to very developing countries, it becomes extremely important that Covaxin gets the approval of the WHO.
Right. This approval is also a shot in the arm for India's COVID-19 vaccine diplomacy and the initiatives that it has taken on that front. This approval now allows the procurement of Covaxin by UNICEF and the Gavi COVAX facility for the distribution to countries in need as well.
Yes, this is extremely important. After all, the approval of the WHO makes it easier for countries to recognize the vaccine. Although a dozen countries, as you mentioned, have already recognized Covaxin, and this includes countries like Australia and Mexico. So the efficacy of the vaccine was never in doubt, whether in India or in several countries outside. But several international organizations can move ahead much more freely when there is WHO recognition of it. So this whole idea that WHO has to start acting more efficiently, more impartially, and with greater degree of its retaining its international character and independence is extremely important, and it's a happy sign that this has finally come through a day before Diwali.
Indeed, and thanks very much once again for sharing those perspectives with us here on Beyond World is One.